but a couple of years ago, it was really quiet in this gray area of drinking. And so I actually think stories like this that feel very ordinary and feel very benign, like my drinking felt very casual, are really important to highlight because I actually think it's where a majority of us end up residing for longer than we intend to because we don't see it as a problem. It's like because it's not this glaring black and white problem, we almost enable it longer than we need to because we can justify it. We can excuse it. It's not that big of a deal. It's not really causing a problem. And so we stay stuck. And that was me for a lot of years. Hi, welcome back to the show. I'm so glad you're here and that you didn't quit on me after episode 1. You guys, I was joking with John Paul after I recorded that episode. I was so excited and nervous about recording my first solo. And I had this whole thing planned. Like, I'm going to talk to you guys about this and that. I'm going to cover this. And I had this like grandiose ideas of things I was going to talk about. And just so you know, I talked about none of them. Ah, life is funny. And I didn't expect also to like cry in the first 2 minutes of the episode and then laugh half the time. I think I was snorting at one point, but all to say, if you've listened to episode 1, if you haven't, go back and listen to it. If you listen to it, thank you for sticking around and giving me another shot at episode 2. It was honestly really fun and I'm having a blast at doing this. I don't know if you know this, but I've been wanting to start a podcast for years and it finally feels right. All just to say, if there's something that in your life that you're wanting to do, timing is everything and you can't really rush things. I don't think I could have done this exact podcast 2 years ago when I wanted to start it. So it feels super, just great. It feels great. I'm so happy. I'm really, really enjoying it. And I'm scared shitless, but that's okay. Okay, let's talk about today's episode. So today I'm going to talk to you about my journey to sobriety. I think it's really important. So you and I are new friends. We're going to be besties, but we're not quite there yet. So we're new friends. And I think it's really important that we just get to know each other. So I'm going to, over the next couple of weeks, just share some stories of things in my life so that you get an understanding of, I don't know, just stuff about me so that it makes it easier for you to see maybe a part of yourself in my story. So I want to share with you about my journey to sobriety. Now, listen, I am not telling you to live alcohol free. It is none of my business what you do in your own home with your own life. Like, you got to do you. But this episode is bigger than just about sobriety. It's really asking us to step back and look at some of the things that maybe we do on autopilot, whether that's in our marriages, whether it's in our careers, whether it's in our drinking habits or our eating habits. There are a lot of things that maybe we do that we deep down in our intuition, if we turned within, bringing it back to the show, if we turned it within, then maybe we would choose to do differently. And alcohol was one of those things that I yo-yoed with for years. Like I knew in my gut that it wasn't good for me. And by good for me, I don't mean like physiologically good for me. I just mean it wasn't sitting well with me emotionally, mentally, deep within my heart. I did not see myself as someone who enjoyed drinking. And yet I continued to do it for probably almost a decade, if I'm really being honest, for too long. So I want to share with you just a little bit my story into sobriety in case you are trying to make any type of change in your own life. I know how hard making changes can be. And I think it's really important to just take a step back and evaluate things. So let's get into it. I never considered myself to be a big drinker. I always thought of myself as like a social drinker and have a glass of wine here, maybe 2 glasses there, a couple spicy margaritas if it's out with girlfriends. So I never really considered myself a big drinker. And yet it's funny if I look back at my life in my 20s and my 30s and early 40s, everything in my life that was important was marked with a drink in hand. So whether that was my children's baptisms, Christmases, last day of school, first day of school, Friday night celebration, like whatever it was, I always had a glass of wine in my hand. It's just what I did. It's also what my family did. It's how I grew up. My parents also were not big drinkers, and yet alcohol was really around as an adult. I always saw it around us. And it sort of became this thing, like it was just socially acceptable. It's what everybody did. It's what my parents did, my siblings. We all would just have a drink. And it would be anything, like had a stressful day, let's have a drink. coming home to visit my parents. Let's sit down and have a drink. Let's go out to dinner. Let's get drinks. Like everything in my life was sort of marked with a drink. And I didn't think anything of it because it wasn't necessarily a quote unquote problem in my life. And I think it's really important to kind of mark this story and start here because I think if we're being honest about our relationship with alcohol, I think a majority of us find ourselves living in this gray area with drinking. So we see the stories of people who quit drinking who, recognize themselves as being an alcoholic and it was destructive in their lives and they had a real problem and they felt that they needed to quit and did need to quit. And that's a very, very real thing. And I think those stories are incredibly important and powerful. And I will say, when I was beginning to think about living sober and alcohol free, I didn't see a lot of stories of women who just said, I'm not going to drink because it just doesn't make me feel good. I don't necessarily have a problem with it. It's not destroying my life. I don't want to do it anymore. It wasn't really something people were talking about. And this was 3, 4 years ago. And I know the landscape has changed, but a couple of years ago, it was really quiet in this gray area of drinking. And so I actually think stories like this that feel very ordinary and feel very benign, like my drinking felt very casual, are really important to highlight because I actually think it's where a majority of us end up residing for longer than we intend to because we don't see it as a problem. It's like because it's not this glaring black and white problem, we almost enable it longer than we need to because we can justify it. We can excuse it. It's not that big of a deal. It's not really causing a problem. And so we stay stuck. And that was me for a lot of years. I had gotten into yoga and meditation when I was pregnant with Asher, who's going to be 16 years soon, which is crazy. So, when I was pregnant with him, so it was like 16 years ago. And meditation sort of dabbled in my life. It's so funny because meditation kind of yo-yoed in my life the same way sobriety has. But when I really got serious about meditation, it was probably about 5, 6 years ago. And I started having a daily meditation practice that we'll talk about another day. But when I started getting really into meditation, I started making a lot of other changes in my life. Things just started snowballing. I started really cleaning up my diet. I started being more conscious of relationship dynamics. I started putting myself to bed earlier. I started just taking care of myself in a different way. And it's interesting because I would make all of these really conscious choices. And then at like 5, 6 o'clock, I'd pour myself a glass of wine. And I didn't think it was that big of a deal. But there was always something that sort of like didn't sit well with me. So I would be, making myself this really healthy meal and I would eat really clean and organically throughout the whole day. And then I would pour myself this toxic beverage. And I just was like, but it's okay because it's not that bad for you. It's wine, even if it was like organic wine. And didn't really attribute it to be like, oh, you're drinking ethanol, you're drinking something toxic. I really did not want to give it up. And I don't even know that I was like consciously thinking about it. I didn't want to give it up. It wasn't even on my radar to give it up. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. But the more I continued down this path of, trying to get up earlier before the kids so that I could get my meditations in or I'd go for a run, the more I started noticing, wow, the next day I don't feel so great after I drink. And I used to joke with John Paul. I was like, I think I'm becoming allergic to wine. And he's like, no, that's just how wine makes you feel. Welcome to like the world, kid. It's just wine will make you feel this way. And I was like, shit, I think I'm going to have to do something about it. And so it didn't sit well with me. I hate to use the word like energetically, but like in my heart of hearts, it wasn't settling well with me. And physiologically, the older I was getting and the cleaner and the healthier it was becoming, the more obvious the effects of alcohol were feeling on not just my body physically, but also just on like my mental energy or my mental capacity, on my mood. I would notice my anxiety was really high. If I had a couple of drinks the next morning, I'd be more impatient with the kids. And it was one of these things where I was like, what in the world am I doing? And I had yo-yoed with giving up alcohol before. So I had done like, the dry January or September reset where I would say, I'm not drinking for a month and I would feel amazing. You guys, it was crazy because I would feel so good not drinking for a month. But the thought of continuing into like week 5 or week 6 seemed like crazy to me. I was like, I'm not going to keep doing that. I don't have a problem. Yes, it felt great to take January off, or yes, the September reset felt great. But, day one on the next month, I'd pour myself a glass of rosé, even just a small glass, because I still didn't think it was that big of a deal. But I had done this for enough years that I was beginning to see the pattern. And there was a small little voice in my head that was like, after dry January, you could just keep going in February. It feels really good. And you could give yourself permission to keep doing that. And that voice would creep in and I'd hear it. And immediately I'd be like, oh, you've got a girls trip coming up. What about the spring break? What about when your family's coming over? That would make everyone so uncomfortable. And it felt almost like too big of an inconvenience to quit drinking, if that makes any sense. Like my life, it felt inconvenient to my life. And so I think I continued down this road longer than I had anticipated. And then COVID hit in 2020. And my drinking started picking up a little bit more. JP and I that fall ended up taking the kids out to California for a couple of months, which I don't know if you know the story about us living in Southern California, but it was really prompted by this road trip we took. We rented our house in Chicago and then rented an Airbnb in Southern California and spent 2 months out there. And it was literally life changing. Anyway, I digress. When we were out in California, that first time, we spent a lot of time at the beach, and JP and I would go down and watch sunset, and every night I had a glass of wine. And you guys, I think I did that for 2 months straight. And I didn't think it was even that big of a deal because we were in, Southern California. It was COVID. There was no place I had to be. The kids were safe. They were hanging out with us, swimming at the beach. It was just one glass of wine. What was one glass of wine on a Tuesday night? What was one on a Thursday? But by the end of that trip, I started to feel so yucky, not just physically yucky, but I just felt gross mentally. I wasn't proud of myself. I didn't feel like I was living in integrity. I wasn't being honest about who I really wanted to be. And there was this thing I was doing that started to feel almost shameful. And I got really tired of living that way. It was just getting really old. And we came home from California and I knew immediately, I was like, something has to change. What I want for my life, like the level of things that I want, the way I want to live in integrity, the emotions I want to be able to experience, and the whole thing of this great, beautiful, big life, this full life that I want cannot happen if I'm sitting having a glass of wine on a Tuesday night or on a Thursday night. It just won't happen. I will never become that woman that I know that I can become. And so I made the decision. I was like, I'm going to quit. I don't know when, but it's happening. And I started having these casual conversations with John Paul. I told him, I think I'm going to quit drinking and I don't know when, and I'm nervous and I don't know how it's going to happen. And I did not have it thought out. It was just, a gut feeling that I was sharing with him. And then that New Year's Eve, so it was December 31st, 2020, we were at my parents' house in Cleveland, Ohio. And we were sitting around, I'll never forget this, around my parents' kitchen table, and we were drinking. I had a glass of white wine in my hand, and I think it was like average at best white wine, and it was probably warm. And we're just sitting around talking. And you know that feeling when like you have a drink in your hand, you're like, I don't want to finish this. Like, why am I going to drink this? And I stood up from the table. I looked at everybody. I gave everybody a kiss goodnight. And I said, thank you so much. I love you all so much. I mean, I don't know why I said thank you. I probably didn't say thank you. I just told them I love them, Happy New Year. And I walked over to the sink and I poured the glass of wine down the sink. And I looked at JP before I went to bed. I go, I think that's the last glass of wine I'm ever going to have. I really didn't think that much of it. And I will tell you to this day, that was the last drink I ever had. And that was 3.5 years ago. When we got home to Chicago that January, when we left my parents, I was like, okay, here we go. Here we go. It's going to be a dry January, and I'm going to give myself permission to just keep going into February and then keep going to March. We'll just see what happens and no pressure. And I was really excited. I was really, really excited. I was really hopeful, which I think is really important to just comment and share. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I was just excited and hopeful. I was like, I've been wanting to do this for so long. It was almost as if like I'd finally given myself permission, and I was really excited to dive in. And my first couple of weeks into it, I remember it was a Saturday evening, and JP and I used to, when the kids would go to bed, we have this old fashioned record player, and we put on a record. He'd pour me a drink, and we had this great fireplace in our living room, and we'd sit around and listen to records and just have a drink or two, he and I. And he's like, "Hey," I was upstairs. I put the kids to bed, and he's like, "Come on down. I have a gift for you." And I was like, "Okay." And he had the fire going, and he had a record on, and I was like, "What is it going to be? Lingerie, jewelry? Like, what is it?" And I went downstairs, and he had this package wrapped up for me. And I opened it up, and inside was the book Quit Like a Woman by Holly Whitaker. I don't know if any of you read it, but it was a great story about a woman making a choice to live alcohol free. And he said to me, he's like, "I'm so proud of what you're doing. And I want to support you. And this is just my little way of telling you that I've got your back. And I think this is incredible what you're doing." And it really meant so much to me. And it's so funny because it felt like the most ordinary moment. And it was really in that moment, I was like, okay, you've got someone who's looking at you and encouraging you to do this. You're not stopping. You're not going to quit. And the kids all knew I was quitting. I was giving up alcohol too. And they were all super excited. And it was almost like the whole family was behind me. And I want to stop here for a second because I also just want to comment because I think it's important to note here too that John Paul was not doing this with me. He was still drinking at the time, and he ended up drinking for a few more months after I became sober. And it was really important for me and to him that I do this on my own. I didn't want to be attached to someone else on this. I didn't want this to be something we were doing together. I wanted this to be something I was doing for myself. Whether or not he came along with me, whether or not he supported me, I had to make the decision for me and me alone. And I did. And I told myself, this will probably change the dynamics in your marriage. This is going to change the dynamics in your relationship with your family, your family of origin. This is going to change the dynamics with your kids and your friends. And not everyone's going to go with you. And not everyone is going to support you. And you have to make this decision that the only person whose opinion matters is yours. And I did. I had made that choice. And so he knew. I was like, I'm doing this with or without you. And I know it's going to affect us, but I've got to do this. And I say that because I think a lot of times we think we can do something and sort of convince someone to come along with us or that they'll change their mind too, or, you can persuade them and you can't. You can't be responsible for someone else and they can't be responsible for you. So I went on this journey solo and about 2.5 months into it, he was still drinking, but he'd have less. So we'd go out to dinner and I would order sparkling water and he'd have maybe one glass of wine, maybe two. And I do think I don't know if it was because it's not that much fun drinking alone in a marriage, I'm not really sure, but it ended up that he decided that he was gonna also quit. And when he decided that he was gonna stop drinking, we had a long conversation too. I was like, "Again, I don't wanna be responsible for this." And he said the same thing. He's like, "I'm doing this on my own, and you can also be doing this on your own. And we are each independently having our experience with learning to live sober, and they cannot be dependent on each other." As I said to him, I don't know how long this is going to last for me. I think it'll last a while, but what happens if I change my mind?" He's like, "I'm going to do my thing. You do your thing." And we were just kind of like parallel pathing it, if that makes any sense. And it was incredible. It was just so wonderful. I feel really fortunate that I had someone that I could share some of these firsts with. So I wasn't really doing it, even though I was doing it on my own, I wasn't doing it alone. There was someone that I could have conversations with around like, "I'm nervous about this," or "How do you think the first holiday is going to feel?" Or "What should I say to these friends?" Or "We're having people over, should we still serve them wine? Like, what does that look like?" There were so many things that happened that first year that I was really glad that I had someone else I could bounce sort of feelings and ideas off of. And that was really wonderful in our marriage. It's been 3.5 years now since I've been alcohol free. And I'm not going to go into detail about, all the different things that have happened over the past 3.5 years. But I will tell you the first year was just a year of a lot of firsts. And I think it can be really intimidating that first year of like, how is that first holiday going to go? How's the first girls trip going to go? And I am not going to lie to you and say it was smooth and easy. That first year was really, really rough. And I will also say, I think year two was pretty rough too. And the reason I say that is because In sobriety, there's nowhere to run. You come face to face with yourself, and there is no numbing, there is no checking out. You are forced to face with everything, come face to face with all of your feelings, all of your emotions with really no vice. And I will say I chose to go into sobriety really clear with myself that I was going to, as best I could, not pick up any other vices. So it wasn't like I was substituting, you know, alcohol now with CBD or marijuana or something else. I was really saying, I want to be clear headed. I want to be clear minded. And it's going to feel really yucky. And I think with sobriety, you have to get really okay being not okay. And as cheesy as it sounds, being comfortable in the uncomfortable, because it's going to be a lot of uncomfortable moments. I'd like to, sugarcoat it and say that everyone's going to be supportive and situations are going to be easy breezy. And I'm just going to tell you right now, they're not. They're just not. They're going to be uncomfortable. And I think the thing is you just need to know if that's how it's going to go. And it has nothing to do with you. The uncomfortable moments you feel in sobriety will have nothing to do with you. And the sooner you can realize that, and the sooner that you can compartmentalize that and say, oh, this is someone else's experience, and they might not get it, and they might say weird comments, and people will be awkward, uncomfortable, and you just let them live in it. I made the choice when I would go to social settings or situations, whether it was with family or friends, that I was not going to take on the energy of their uncomfortableness. Like I wasn't going to put that on myself. So someone would be awkward or uncomfortable. They'd ask like a weird question, like, well, are you pregnant or do you have a drinking problem? And I refused to like make a joke about it to make them feel more comfortable. And I would just stay quiet and I'd let them sort of sit in it, not to be mean or not to make them feel bad about themselves, but just because I refuse to take on other people's energy and let that be placed on me. I am a people pleaser by nature. I did that for many, many years. And it's really just been in my mid 40s that I've decided to no longer take that on. And there are certainly things that I will own and apologize for or, make other people feel comfortable with. But when it comes to my sobriety and how other people react to it or respond to it, that's where I draw the line. And I just don't take it upon myself. And so a situation would happen and someone would make a comment or be uncomfortable. You can picture the whole thing, right? I don't need to explain it. And I would just smile and I'd stand in my ground. I mean, not like I wouldn't do like something like physically, like I'd really stand up, like physically. I'm just saying, like I would let myself be really present. And I'd allow the feelings of uncomfortableness to come up in me. And I'd recognize that need, like, oh, you want to say something, you want to make a joke of it to make them feel better. I was like, don't do that, Katy. Don't do that. You don't need to excuse yourself. You don't need to minimize yourself. You don't need to justify yourself. Believe in yourself enough and love yourself enough to know that like you are worthy of existing and living in a world without explaining yourself. And once I got comfortable with that, and I'm going to tell you right now, it takes practice. It didn't happen right away. It takes practice, but I've gotten pretty good at it and it feels so damn good. It feels really empowering. Okay, so that's all to say the first year or two, it's not going to be easy breezy, but it gets better. You get better at it. You get more comfortable with it and you start feeling stronger. As far as how things go, like the effects that I started to feel, I will tell you that everything is better without alcohol. It just is. It just is, which is crazy because for most of my life, I thought it was like I was depriving myself of something if I didn't drink. So the dry January was like I was depriving myself of something, right? Instead of seeing it as like you were gaining something and what a gift it was to give yourself. Alcohol made nothing better. Maybe for a moment it numbed me, but in the long run, it made nothing better. Everything in my life is so much better without alcohol. Motherhood is so much better without alcohol. My marriage is better without alcohol. My body, I sleep better without alcohol. Sex is better without alcohol. I'm going to tell you, it really is. There is a level of intimacy that just doesn't happen when you're numbed by alcohol. And I was really nervous about that when JP and I both became sober. I was like, what is this going to be like? This whole thing, like, are we really doing this together in our marriage? Both of us, like, really clear headed. And so, there's the first couple of times that you're both like, not that we hadn't had sex sober before, but when it starts becoming that's the norm, like you see yourself physically, like there's nothing really to break the ice. And it really created a new level of vulnerability between the two of us to be intimate with each other when we were so present, like in our minds. And it's been such a beautiful gift. So all I'm saying is trust me, nothing, you are not missing anything when alcohol's taken out. It just makes everything so much better. All of that to say, there may be a few of you listening right now, and whether it's alcohol again or something else in your life that you're thinking about changing. For me, the biggest shift happened when I stopped asking myself the question, like, is this a problem in my life? And I started reframing the question to, does this add value to my life? Is this taking me further in the direction that I want to go to become the woman I know I am destined to be? And for me, for alcohol, it was a hell no. It wasn't getting me any closer. I say this all the time, and I want you to hear me out when I say this is I say to JP all the time, I want it all. I want it all. I do. And I have no, like, I say that with no excuse and no like embarrassment. I want a really big, full, incredible life. And I don't mean like I want some crazy house or a jet or a plane. Like, that's totally not what I'm talking about. I mean, I want to experience all the emotions and all the highs and all the lows. And I want to see all the sunsets and I want to feel my feet in the ocean. And I want to go on a hike with him and feel myself getting sweaty. I want to see the sun rise. I want to feel my kids' tears, if they've had a bad day at school and I want to feel them like falling on my sweatshirt or on my shoulder. I want to remember what it looked like as the sun was shining on my son's hair. I want to feel my partner's arms around me as I'm laying at night and like remember the sound of his breath moving in and out. Like I want to experience everything of life and I want to feel it all. Like I just want all of it. I want it all. I don't want to miss it. Life is so big and beautiful and there's so much of it, but it goes by so fucking fast. It goes so fast. And I don't want to miss it. I don't want to miss any of it. The big stuff, the little stuff. I refuse to give my life up for alcohol anymore. I refuse to numb out and miss these moments in life with my kids or my partner or miss a sunset because I'm a little bit numb or I'm hungover the next morning. So I miss that sunrise walk. Like I refuse to do that anymore. So, I started the beginning of this podcast saying my drinking wasn't a problem. But if I'm really being honest, if I look back at my history with alcohol, I actually think it was a problem. It really was. I just justified it for so long, but it was robbing me of all of these moments that created this full, big life. And I'm so grateful now that I can see that. But I know how hard making changes like this is. I get it. There are so many reasons you want to numb out. There are so many reasons we want to cover the pain or to give ourselves advice, let ourselves off the hook. I get it. I get it. And yet, you and I both know that alcohol does us no favors, that it's not making anything in your life easier. That, yes, maybe it'll numb the pain for an hour, or maybe that first glass of wine will feel good. But that shame that you feel, or that disconnection from yourself that you feel comes right back the next morning. And that pain is right there with you. And the only way to deal with it is just to face it head on. Allow yourself to get comfortable being uncomfortable. As humans, we love to be comfortable. And sometimes it's just going to suck. Sometimes it's just going to suck. Life is just going to be hard, whether you're sober or you're not. And so I'm just going to tell you, kids, we just got to kind of settle into it and allow it to happen. But know that the more we can kind of lean into this uncomfortableness, the fuller our lives become and the bigger it feels and the more beautiful it becomes. The highs are higher, the lows may be lower, but I'm telling you, the combo of it all gives you this beautiful, rich, gorgeous life that you will never for a moment regret. When you're making a change like this, I think the thing that can happen, at least for me, I remember feeling, I don't know that I was conscious of it, but there was this fear underneath, like, can I do it? Could I really do it? Could I really quit? And I have this fear around a lot of things. Can I really start a podcast? Can I really write a book? Like, can I really do these things? And half the time is, I don't fucking know. I don't know. But what I do know is that my love for myself has to be bigger than my fear. It just has to be. And so every day I lean deeper and deeper into that love of self. And I know that, like, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if quitting alcohol is going to, work for me in the long run. But what I do know is that I'm not quitting on me. I'm going to bet on myself time and time and time again until I'm on my deathbed. Like, I will bet on myself every time. I think we get so accustomed to counting ourselves out, to thinking like, I couldn't do that. I don't know how to do that. I don't know if I could quit drinking. I don't know if I could start a new workout plan. I don't know if I could write a book. Of course you don't know. Of course you don't know. You've never done it before. That's why it's changed and so hard to do. But our love for ourselves has to be stronger than that voice, and it has to be stronger than that fear. And I think developing that love for self is so damn hard. I'm 45 and I am just beginning to tap into it. And I will share a little story with you that that helped me recently just reconfirm that I'm sort of on the right path. And I'm going to share it with you because I look for it now and I see it and I'm like, okay, all right, all right. You are loved. You're worthy of loving. Okay, okay, girl. Because I also have that inner critic and that inner voice that can just be like, you're probably going to drink tomorrow and like the podcast isn't going to work. And who are you to write that book proposal? That voice exists for all of us. I'm not going to tell you that that doesn't exist for me. That would be a bullshit. So yes, that exists for me too. So, I love walking on the beach. I go for a long beach walk almost every morning. It's not exercise in my mind. It's literally just like my mental health walk. The kids in JP are always like, please go for your walk. I'm the better version of myself when I walk. But I was out walking the other morning and it was this beautiful, beautiful sunrise. I know you've all pictured these, you've all had these moments. And like the sun was just coming up over this little hill in Manhattan Beach. And so it was just beginning to glisten on the ocean. And there were clouds, which usually we don't have a ton of clouds in Southern California, but it made this gorgeous, pink and purpley sky. And I'm kid you not, like the dolphins were jumping and people were surfing. And I was walking along and all of a sudden, like I was just looking at the ocean and this beautiful wave like came crashing down and the birds like on cue were flying by. And I had this feeling of this moment where I just paused. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is all happening just for me. I was the only one out walking on the beach at that moment. There was no one around. I'm like, all of this beauty right now, the universe is doing this whole thing, is orchestrated this whole moment just for me to witness it. And it's doing it because I'm that loved. I'm that worthy of this. This extraordinary, beautiful moment is being put on just for me, an audience of one. And whether or not I chose to believe it or don't believe it, there is this knowing that I am loved so much by the universe, by God, by spirit, by whatever you want to call it. Like I am so loved and was put here on this earth just for that one moment, just to experience this. But the thing is you are too in every moment. And I find these moments more and more when I look for them, whether it's, at night when I'm going to bed and the moon is shining through my window and it's like has a little glisten on my pillowcase. I just sort of smile to myself, like, okay, I get it. You love me. I am loved. Or I see like the sun glimmer on my son's hair through the kitchen window. And it's just this moment of like this awe and this wonder. And you feel this connection to something bigger than you are because you are. We all are. We are connected to something so much bigger. But the thing is that we don't even realize is the thing that is bigger is us. It's you and it's me and it lives within us. And I know it sounds cheesy. I get it. But I'm telling you, when you can start to open your eyes and allow yourself to see that everything that's happening in your life, that's spinning, that all of it that's happening is happening for you. And there's this beautiful symphony of a world that's being put on. This whole show is being put on just for you because you and me are that loved. And it's so easy to forget. It's so easy to become disconnected from that. But when you can tap into that and you can say, like, open your heart up, and I mean, really open your heart up, like vulnerably raw, exposed, like open your heart and say, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I know that I am loved because I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. Something bigger than me loves me so much that I am here. And I owe it to that, whatever it may be, whatever you want to call it, I owe it to them and to myself to love myself equally as much and to know that I am worthy of all of this. So when I say, like, I want a big life, like, I want to feel all those things, and you do too. And you are worthy of it. So at the end of the day, whatever change it is that you're trying to make, whether it's something in your marriage, whether it's something in parenting, whether it's something in your career, you are going to face that fear of the unknown of, like, can I do this? And there is no guarantees. That's the hardest part. There's no guarantees. No one's going to come to save you. No one's going to come tell you, you know what, Katie, you're going to be just fine. That's so bright. I think it's really going to work out for you. No one's coming to tell you that. So that love for yourself and that connection to something bigger than you has to be stronger than the fear. And I'm going to tell you, when you can tap into that, anything is possible. All right. I'm going to stop here for today. I've rambled too much. I hope this was helpful in some small way. And just know that you are not alone in making hard change. We are all doing it right now. As you're listening to this, there's a million other people in the world right now trying to make some type of little small increment of change in their own life. You are not alone. And we're all just doing the best we can. So we go forward with compassion with ourselves and curiosity with ourselves. And we just keep showing up day after day. I know I'm going to do it. So thank you for listening. I will see you here next week. If you haven't already subscribed to the show, you know I would be forever grateful for you to you if you did. And if you like this episode, which I hope you did, I mean, if you didn't like it, don't worry about it. But if you did like it, if you would rate and review, I would be so grateful. And maybe share it with a friend who you think would like to listen to this. I can only do this because of your support. So thanks for making it possible. And I will see you all next week.